We continue the series of self-paced videos for Module 3, Developing an Entrepreneurial Mindset, with problem solving through creativity and innovation. Referring back to our guiding metaphor, the idea of a castle, we can say that problem solving is like navigating the castle's secret passages and intricate tunnels. Let's open that door of creativity and innovation and see where it takes us. In this second video of Module 3, we're going to cover problem solving as the maze of tunnels and secret passages that can take you to the other side of the troubled area, to the solution you are looking for. We'll start with what is problem solving and how it's done, switching to a quick mental exercise of solving the candle classical problem. Then we'll be moving forward towards how to solve problems with the effectuation model. Next, we'll be covering what to be aware of when it comes to problem solving, and close with an invitation to use 6 thinking hats exercise to get creative and innovative in solving problems. Just that, we added a twist to the exercise to make it more disruptive and impactful. You'll see. Get that torch and walk with me towards the corner store passage, will you? Just as castle inhabitants explore hidden passages to uncover new paths, problem solving involves exploring alternative solutions and approaches. This uncharted path can lead to innovative and unexpected ways to overcome challenges. Navigating through secret passages may involve encountering obstacles like locked doors or traps. Problem solving entails adapting to unexpected hurdles and finding ways to overcome them. So I ask you, how do you define problem solving? Problems are an inescapable part of life, both in and out of work, so we can all benefit from having strong problem-solving skills. When we think about problem solving, we think about what we employ in the face of new situations, when we bring out original thinking, creativity, and adaptability to design innovative ways to overcome those situations. Addressing new challenges requires the application of problem-solving skills to uncharted territories where tried and true solutions may not suffice. Problem solving also implies striving to achieve a particular goal without having existing means to obtain it, which involves drive and determination in overcoming the challenges presented in front, which leads to creativity and innovation. If you already have the means to obtain it, there is no problem to solve. In all problem-solving situations, there is an initial state and there is a goal state, and you start moving from the first to the second one by dividing the initial goal into smaller, more manageable chunks until reaching a level where there are readily means to obtain it. There are many approaches to how to solve a problem, but perhaps 3 most common ones are difference reduction, working backward, and means-ends analysis. Let's take an example of how to find a 4-digit combination for a safe and see what each type of problem-solving approach implies. You know that when you hear a click, it means you found the correct digit. Difference reduction. The initial state is no knowledge of the combination, while the end state is knowledge of all 4 digits and their order. We set the sub-goal to reduce the difference between these 2 states, and identifying the first digit helps accomplish this initial sub-goal. We try the 9 combinations and we hear a click. Now we know the first digit. Our current state now includes knowledge of the first digit, but there is still a difference between our current state and the desired one. We set as sub-goals to identify the second number, then the third, and finally the fourth and last one. The idea behind this method is to set up sub-goals that, once accomplished, put us in a state closer to our goal. Working backward. This approach is mostly used in solving mathematical problems. We reason from the main goal towards a sub-goal. If I can prove this end state, then it would mean XYZ. So now I need to prove XYZ instead of the main goal. We continue the inferences towards other sub-goals until we reach one for which we have readily means to obtain it, or in plain terms, we know it's true or we know how to do it. Means-end analysis. In this method, we compare our current state with the goal to identify the most important difference between them. Then we aim to eliminate that difference as our main sub-goal. We then focus on a means or a procedure to accomplish this sub-goal. If during the discovery of such a procedure we identify an obstacle in applying it, we introduce a new sub-goal to eliminate that obstacle, and so on. This approach allows us to take action regardless if in the beginning this takes us further from the end goal. Problem solving is also about analyzing situations, drafting strategies, and making informed decisions. We start with defining the problem as a statement or in a visual form. Then we determine the goal and break it down into sub-goals. We select a problem-solving strategy and apply it by making informed decisions to achieve each sub-goal. It's that simple. As a quick mental exercise, we propose to you action number 2. Solve the classical candle problem. You don't need to grab a pen and paper to write down the answers, but you can take it as food for thought and search thoroughly for the solution. You will find the exercise explained also in your working journal. Try it out by yourself first before checking out the resolution at the end of the journal. The candle problem, also known as Dunker's candle problem, Gestalt psychologist Karl Dunker, is a cognitive performance test measuring the influence of functional fixedness on a participant's problem-solving abilities. We won't tell you what functional fixedness means, so we don't spoil this exercise for you, but you can read about it in the resolution at the end of the journal. The problem asks how can you fix and light a candle on a wall made of cork so that the wax from the candle doesn't drip on the table below. To do so, you only have a candle, a box of matches, and a box of pushpins. Give it a moment and try to think how you would solve this. If you don't find the answer, check the resolution in the working journal. The effectuation model is a theoretical framework that describes how entrepreneurs think, make decisions, and take action in uncertain and dynamic environments. It contrasts with the traditional causation approach, which assumes that entrepreneurs predictably move from a predetermined goal to a specific means of achieving it. The effectuation model is particularly relevant to developing an entrepreneurial mindset, as it encourages a different way of thinking and decision making. So how can you use it to solve problems? You've heard it numerous times that entrepreneurs aren't like others. They are a special breed of their own. And you wonder if you are one of them or can become one of them. The answer is both yes and no, because there are things which you can educate yourself into, but they won't feel comfortable and you won't feel at ease with them on the long run. So what makes an entrepreneur be different when it comes to solving problems? It can be the effectuation model, which they may be consciously or unconsciously choosing to implement. What is it made of, this model? There are 5 principles. Bird in hand principle, stating that you should make use of what you already have at your disposal, your identity, your abilities, your network of people, to identify and pursue opportunities while solving problems. Affordable loss implies that entrepreneurs only invest what they afford themselves to lose. This is how they see investments in general while testing and iterating solutions. Crazy Kilt principle says that they form alliances and partnerships which sometimes are unexpected even for themselves. They do this in order to share the risks and rewards and co-create the future, like building a crazy colorful kilt from smaller pieces. The idea behind the pilot in the plane principle is that they shape and co-create the future rather than trying to predict it or depend on external factors. Just like a pilot controls the plane they are flying with, regardless of weather, number of passengers, route detours, and so on. Last, the lemonade principle advocates for pivoting and adapting plans and strategies to unexpected events or challenges while still making the best of any situations, like making lemonade from lemons. Are you ready now to use this map on those secret passages and tunnels within the castle? Here are some ideas on what to be aware of when it comes to problem solving. Define every problem you encounter and understand its complexity rather than trying to solve it too soon. By taking the time to understand the root causes and complexities of the problem, you can make more informed and effective decisions, and you can also choose a proper strategy to solve the problem. Rushing to fix a problem may also lead to superficial solutions that do not address underlying issues, causing the problem to resurface later. Restructuring a problem most of the times resides in being able to mentally represent it in a certain way. Once you arrive at the correct mental set, the solution isn't far away. In doing so, you can also try to think about it differently by finding an appropriate analogy. If two problems share the same underlying structure, Solving one of them means you can solve the other by relying on the analogy. You can have difficulties with a problem because you failed to include something important in your representation or because you did include something which is not an important part of the problem. Remember that when you correctly frame a problem, you transform an ill-defined problem into a well-defined one in order to solve it. If you make the wrong assumptions in doing so, your mental set can create an obstacle on the path to the solution. Come back to this idea after you have solved the candle problem and understood what mental fixedness is. We all wish to become experts in our fields, but sometimes we don't understand all the benefits this comes with. When you become an expert, the way you mentally represent problems qualitatively differs from how a novice does it. It becomes easier to store more mental representations and call them in when needed from memory as readily made solutions. Moreover, experts will often make a plan before starting to solve a problem, while novices will just have a go at it and hope for the best. Another good thing from becoming an expert is that once you reach that level, your thinking processes become mostly automatic. They are carried out without conscious control as if on automatic pilot, like riding a bike or like walking. They used to be problems to solve, but once your brain got a hang of it, they became automated aspects of your life, leaving room and brain power for other types of problems to be solved. And how do you feel now after all this strolling and exploring of passages and tunnels and corridors? Ready for some action? We know you are eager to put to good use all you have learned so far. There is one more thing we want to show you before we give you the keys to the entire castle and invite you to be walking along all corridors. Thus, we propose action number 3, using 6 thinking hats as a creative technique to solve problems. You'll see that we added a twist to it so you can remember it easily. You don't need to grab that pen and paper to write down the answers, because you can take it as food for thought and answer each one thoroughly in your working journal. As mentioned, we invite you to learn a new technique for problem solving called 6 thinking hats, which you can use to boost creativity. The idea behind it is to take different perspectives while trying to answer questions that solve problems. The twist we added to it refers to assigning a famous character to each hat, so you can easily remember it based on the specifics of that perspective. How you use it? Well, you first must be faced with a problem that you don't know how to solve or you are unsure of its complexities. You get ready to explore and understand it by challenging yourself to look at it from various angles. You start with the white hat, which you can associate with Sherlock Holmes. You look only at facts, data, and information to assess the problem and answer the questions you have. You continue with the red hat, which can be linked to Forrest Gump. It's all about emotions, feelings, and intuition. Tap into that part to understand the problem. Then comes the black hat, or Hermione Granger from Harry Potter. You look at risks, weaknesses, problems. Don't linger there more than needed and move to the yellow hat, to Willy Wonka, best known for its perspective of looking at benefits, opportunities, and options ahead. See what comes out of it. Shift to the green hat, where Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean is representative. He is focused on new ideas, on exploring the world of possibilities while employing endless creativity. Then off to the blue hat, to the Gandalf in you, like in Lord of the Rings. Consider the greater strategic implications, involve meta-thinking perspective, and take on a mentor role to look at the problem. This all takes some time, so book it accordingly to practice this new way of problem solving, and use your working journal as a guide for this exercise. This time, we end the video by saying, every problem is a gift. Without problems, we would not grow. This quote by Tony Robbins highlights the perspective that challenges and problems, often seen as obstacles, can actually be valuable opportunities for personal growth. When we face problems, we are compelled to think creatively, find solutions, and develop new skills. These experiences push us out of our comfort zones and encourage us to adapt, learn, and evolve. See you in our last video together, where we will be covering using failure as a valuable learning experience.